You're 40 years old, and on paper, you have $8.7 million. But the man across the wedding table thinks you failed. He just asked what you do. You told him the truth. You clean restaurant exhaust hoods at night. After the cooks leave, after the fryers cool, after the last waiter locks the front door, you climb into the grease and scrape the baked-on residue out of the steel vents above the stoves. Then, you leave a laminated card by the back door and drive to the next restaurant. And the second you say that out loud, his face changes, not enough to be rude, just enough to tell you he has already placed you beneath him. To him, you sound like a man who never made it. But here's what he will never understand. You do not own a cleaning company. You own the one filthy deadline every restaurant is legally terrified to miss. And that ugly little difference is why everyone at this table spent 10 years trying to look successful, while you spent 10 years becoming free. But that is the end of the story. The story starts 10 years earlier. When you are 30 years old, rent is due in 4 days, and there is $183.40 in your checking account. The math does not fit. And the business idea that might save you is so embarrassing you almost don't write it down. There was no catastrophe. That's almost the worst part. You didn't crash. You just slowly arrived here, one reasonable decision at a time. And now, it's a weekday morning and your alarm has been going for 12 minutes, and you're staring at a crack in the ceiling because getting up means the day starts. Your phone lights up. Payment failed. The gym, $31.99, declined. You haven't been in 5 months. And the thing that lands hardest isn't the embarrassment. It's the flicker of relief. One less thing pretending you're a person still on the way up. Here's how 30 became a verdict instead of a number. At 22, you took the job with benefits because everyone said to. At 26, your boss promised the next step and told you to be patient, so you were patient. At 29, the company froze everything, and the next step stopped getting mentioned. And now the person who approves your time off is 26 years old and says, let's circle back in meetings. And somewhere in there, patient stopped meaning wise and started meaning stuck. And you keep a scoreboard you didn't ask to keep. The people you came up with have pulled ahead and not looked back. Someone you used to date is posting photos from a cliff somewhere sunny, another person's hand on the railing. You feel it most in the smallest moments. You put the $6.99 blueberries back and buy the $1.89 frozen ones, and on the drive home, the check engine light blinks on and you don't even react. Because reacting to things you can't fix is a habit you quit around 28. Your mother calls every Sunday and asks the same gentle question. Everything okay at work, honey? And you say, yeah, all good. And you can hear in the pause after she says, good, that she doesn't believe you, and you get off the phone fast. You've started declining plans before anyone can invite you, because I'm busy is easier to say than I can't afford it. You once did the math on what it would take just to be even, no debt, no savings, just zero. And the number was so far off it made you laugh the wrong way. That's the part nobody who hasn't lived here understands. Broke isn't loud or sudden. It's 1,000 small subtractions, each one teaching you to expect a little less until expecting less becomes the entire shape of your life. That flat nothing where the fear used to be. That's the real condition, not the empty account, the numbness. Being broke long enough teaches you to stop wanting things, and a person who's stopped wanting things has stopped building anything. The only object in the apartment that argues with the numbness is a notebook you find cleaning out a closet that weekend. Your handwriting at 19 pressed hard into the first page. Own my own company by 30. You laugh out loud, alone, because it's the funniest and saddest thing you've ever read. You're 30. You have $183. You blew it. Then you stop laughing, and instead of putting it back in the box, you set it on the kitchen counter. That's the only thing you do. We'll come back to it. 4 days later, because you're broke enough to say yes to anything, a guy you barely know offers you $150 cash for one night of work. Wear clothes you'll throw away. The job is scraping baked-on grease out of the steel exhaust hood over a restaurant's stoves and the duct running up from it through the roof. For 4 hours you're on a ladder and then flat on your back inside a metal box that smells like a fryer died, black sludge in your hair. People went to school for careers, you keep thinking. I'm 30, doing this for gas money. And then, on a water break, you see the invoice on his clipboard. For this, for one night, $1,100. One kitchen, $30 of chemicals, and he's got a second job after this. So you ask the only question that matters: how often does a place like this need it? And the answer rearranges something frozen in your chest. As often as the kitchen cooks hard enough to be dangerous. Every few months for a busy one. Not because the owner feels like it. Grease over an open flame is fuel, and the fire code, the insurance company, and the inspector will not let a working kitchen ignore it. The demand isn't a sales pitch, it's the law of the building. And then you notice the card taped by the back door, where no one ever looks. Service date, next due date, a company's name at the bottom. The cooks ignore it, the customers never see it. But if that card lapses, the whole restaurant is exposed. Failed inspection, voided insurance, a padlock on the door. You drive home at the worst hour of the night smelling like something died, and for the first time since you were 19, the numbness is gone. You don't sleep that night. You sit at the kitchen table with the laptop and do the thing almost no one bothers to do. You actually look. Who owns these contracts? How many kitchens sit within 20 miles of your apartment? What a certification costs. And the more you read, the clearer the shape gets. Every strip mall kitchen, every school cafeteria, every hospital kitchen, every chain restaurant in your city runs on the same code, needs the same card, lives on the same clock, and hardly anyone wants the job because it's filthy and invisible and impossible to brag about. The market is enormous, mandatory, permanent, and embarrassing, which is another way of saying wide open. You scrape together the two boring things that gatekeep this whole world: a certification, so your card means something to an inspector, and liability insurance, because you're working around fire risk in other people's buildings. You sell the things you don't use. You buy a used pressure washer off a guy retiring out of the business for $1,400 you don't have. Your first customer is a small diner near your apartment. You underprice the job on purpose because right now you need the first card with your name on it more than you need the money. And the night you do it, alone in a dark kitchen at 1 a.m, your one machine dies. The kitchen has to be spotless before the cook clocks in at 6, and there's no money to replace anything, and for a second you're 28 again. Then you don't let it. You take the machine apart on the tailgate under your headlights, find the clog, fix it, and finish at 5:40 with 20 minutes to spare. That morning, you tape a fresh card by the diner's back door with your own company's name at the bottom, and you sit in the truck and look at it for a long time, because that ugly little card is the first proof that any of this is real. First month, 4 kitchens, all after midnight, all on top of the day job you can't quit yet. You clear $190, $190, less than your old coworker makes on one weekend of overtime. You sit with the number and feel something that isn't pride and isn't disappointment. But you don't quit because you're not looking at the $190. You're looking at what it proves. And when people ask what you're up to, you tell them. And you watch them lose interest the second they hear what it is. Oh, cleaning. Cool. Eyes already sliding to the next thing. At first it stings. Then you realize what it's actually giving you. Cover. A thing that sounds beneath people is a thing nobody follows you into, nobody competes for, nobody tries to take. You stopped wanting the room to lean in. The looking away was starting to feel like a gift. And then comes the part where the story gets boring, which is exactly where most people lose. You do it again and again. The work doesn't get more interesting. It gets more invisible. You sleep 5 hours. You eat standing up. You smell like degreaser in a way that doesn't scrub out of your hands no matter what you try. Month 3 is 9 accounts. Month 6 is 15. The numbers move, but slowly. in a way no one outside your own skull would even notice. And there's a stretch, somewhere in the second winter, where it nearly ends, and not because of a disaster, because of the opposite. Nothing happens. The roots run, the cards get hung, the money comes in flat and unremarkable, and one morning you wake up and realize you've built a life where you do something humiliating in the dark that no one will ever clap for. The temptation isn't exactly to quit. It's to want what the people ahead of you have, the room turning toward them, the feeling of being seen building something. That want is the real test of these years, and it has no audience, which is precisely what makes it so hard to pass. You almost don't pass it. There's a night you sit in the truck in an empty lot with the heater running and seriously, completely plan how you'll go back. A desk, a boss, a normal answer at parties, a life that at least looks like the ones around you. What stops you isn't a motivational quote. It's that when you get home, the notebook is still on the counter, the kid's handwriting. You blew the deadline. You're 32, and the company is small and ugly, and no one's heard of it. But it exists. And the 19-year-old who wrote that line would not believe his luck. So you get up the next morning and you don't quit. You keep your head down through the years that look like nothing, because you've started to understand the secret those boring years are hiding. This is when the gap is opening. It just hasn't surfaced yet. Somewhere in the second year, you figure out the thing that turns a job into a fortune. And it has nothing to do with grease. You lose an account to a guy who's $40 cheaper. It stings until you watch what happens next. The cheaper guy no-shows, the kitchen fails an inspection, and they come crawling back, and this time you charge more and they pay it gratefully. And the whole thing flips in your head. You were never selling clean steel. Anyone can scrape a hood. What you're actually selling is that the inspector, the insurer, and the fire marshal all simply go away. The restaurant doesn't want a cleaner. It wants to stop worrying. So you stop selling the cleaning and start selling the worry. A calendar nobody has to remember, a card that's always current, paperwork that's never a problem. The money was never in the grease. It's in the deadline. A legally required, can't skip it, comes around again deadline that the customer is too scared to miss and too busy to handle. That's the architecture. And here's the part that makes it bulletproof. The demand doesn't flinch. A recession doesn't turn off the fryers. A downturn doesn't repeal the fire code. When money gets tight, a restaurant will cut its marketing, trim its staff, shorten its hours. But it cannot cut the inspection that keeps its doors legally open, because the alternative isn't saving a few $100s. It's losing the entire business. You've planted yourself on the one-line item a struggling owner is least able to cancel. Everyone else's revenue rises and falls with the mood of the market. Yours just keeps coming, deadline after deadline, in good years and bad, like rent, because it essentially is rent. It also builds a wall no competitor can climb, because the wall isn't made of price, it's made of fear. Nobody fires a vendor they trust to save $60 when one missed due date can close their doors. Your accounts stop leaving the way normal cleaning accounts leave. The thing the 19-year-old wanted, something that couldn't be taken from him. You just built it out of the most boring material on earth, other people's deadlines. Once you see the architecture, you can't stop seeing it. The same kitchen that legally needs its hood cleaned also needs its grease traps pumped on a schedule, and its fire extinguishers inspected and tagged every year, and its exit and emergency lights tested, and its suppression system certified. 5 separate deadlines the owner dreads, 5 vendors, 5 invoices, 5 things to forget. So you become the one who makes all 5 disappear. 1 call, 1 calendar. An account worth $1,400 a year quietly becomes worth $6,000, and it never leaves, because leaving now means resolving 5 problems at once. Then you climb. You land your first school district, a dozen cafeteria kitchens on one contract, every one of them bound by the same code, every one a due date that repeats forever whether the budget is good that year or not. Then a hospital, then a regional restaurant group. Then you stop waiting for accounts to come to you and start buying them. The old operators are everywhere once you know to look. 1 truck, a spiral notebook, A body that's tired, a phone full of customers they've served for 20 years and never once raised the price on. They're sitting on recurring contracts they never learned to scale, and most of them just want out. So you buy them. The first route costs you $38,000 for a book of 40 accounts. You make it back in 14 months and keep the accounts forever. You buy the book of the man who handed you that first $150 night the year he retires, and you put your name at the bottom of every card he ever hung. And the two of you shake on it, each feeling like you got the better end. You hire your first real employee, then your third, then your sixth, and you learn the thing that actually prints money at scale, which isn't glamorous either: route density. Get enough accounts close enough together, and one truck can hit 8 kitchens in a night instead of 3, and the math underneath the whole company quietly doubles without a single new customer. Hood cleaning was never the business. It was the first rung. The business is the ladder, and the patience to climb it, one unglamorous rung at a time, is the part almost no one else has the stomach for. By year 10, the company is doing $2.4 million in annual revenue. The margins aren't flashy, but they're steady. And they're steady for a reason that took you years to fully appreciate. The contracts renew because the deadlines renew. A kitchen doesn't get to decide it's done needing to be compliant. So the revenue doesn't bounce around with the economy. It just shows up quarter after quarter on a clock the law sets. And a business like that doesn't get valued like a job. It gets valued like a machine. Your accountant has done books for small businesses for 19 years. Restaurant owners with receipts in shoeboxes, contractors who can't read their own ledgers. She does not impress easily. She's been doing your taxes for 3 years, and one afternoon she sets down her pen, looks at the full picture spread across the table, and says the thing that finally puts a number on what you built. "I don't think you understand what you actually own," she says. She turns the folder around so you can see the tally she's made and reads it off line by line. 214 restaurants, 31 school kitchens, 9 hospital cafeterias, 47 grease trap contracts, 312 extinguisher tags. She taps the page. Every one of these has a due date. Everyone is paying you to make that deadline disappear. She looks up. You don't own a cleaning company. You own a few thousand recurring obligations, legally required, renewing on their own, sitting under hundreds of businesses that can't operate without you. I've valued a lot of companies. People pay a fortune for revenue this boring and this sticky. Conservatively, what you've built here is worth around $8.7 million. You don't say anything for a second, because she just described it more clearly than you ever could. It was never a dirty job. It's a portfolio. Hundreds of deadlines nobody is allowed to miss, each one a small obligation that pays you to make it disappear, all of them renewing while you sleep. No app is coming to disrupt a fire marshal deadline. No competitor out-innovates a due date. There is no bad quarter that turns off the fryers and repeals the code. She asks if you're going to pivot into something more impressive, something with a logo and a pitch. You tell her no. She nods like she expected that and doesn't fully get it. What she doesn't see is that impressive was the whole trap you escaped at 30, which is how you end up back at this wedding 10 years after the 183. Someone from your old life, a coworker who lapped you a decade ago and never thought about it again, asks what you do now. You tell him, commercial kitchens, fire code compliance, exhaust systems, and you watch the small, polite door close behind his face, the old truck in the lot, the off-the-rack suit, the word cleaning. He files you, gently, under didn't quite get there, and turns toward someone with a better story. A few years ago that would have gutted you. Now you feel nothing but a strange relief, because the second someone decides you didn't make it, they stop watching you. And a man who isn't watching you can't get in your way, can't ask you for anything, can't take a thing from you. He has no idea he's standing across from the most free person in the room. The version of you that needed him to know, that needed the room to turn, died somewhere in the quiet years, and you don't miss him. Here's the part almost no one believes until they've lived it. The world rewards boring architecture and quietly punishes visible status, and almost everyone gets it backwards. The man in the better suit is performing a life. You built one in the dark, and the disguise, the backdoor work, the truck, the unimpressive answer at the dinner table, isn't a consolation prize. It's the armor that lets you build it without anyone interfering. And here's what all of it actually bought. And it isn't the trucks or the warehouse or the $8.7 million. Your father gets sick the way fathers eventually do, and you close your laptop and you go, for as long as it takes, because the business runs without you standing over it, and the money doesn't stop when you do. You sit in the hospital for 2 weeks and then 2 more, and not once do you check whether you can afford to be there. Because the answer stopped being a question years ago. There's a man down the hall doing it the hard way, stepping out every couple of hours to take work calls in the stairwell, apologizing to a sick parent and an impatient boss in the same breath, because his life costs too much to pause even for this. You used to be on the exact track to become that man. You watch him, and you finally understand completely what you actually built. It was never about looking successful. It was about this specific week, the freedom to give it entirely to the one place that deserves it, with no quiet calculation running in the back of your mind the whole time. The 30-year-old with 183.42 could not have done that. He'd have had to choose between his father and his rent, and he'd have hated himself either way. You don't have to choose anymore. That's the entire prize, not the number. The ability to be in the room when the room is the only thing that matters. That is what the boring business bought. Not a flex, a presence. The freedom to say I'm going and mean it and not feel the floor shift under you when you do. So go back to the notebook on the kitchen counter. Own my own company by 30. You missed the deadline by years. The line was wrong. But the deadline was never the point. The notebook didn't build the company. There was no magic in the words. The only thing it ever did was refuse to let you go numb at 30, and that turned out to be everything, because being broke at 30 wasn't what made you late. It was what set you free. You had nothing left to protect, no image, no lifestyle, no reputation you were busy defending. And a person with nothing left to protect can finally do the slow, boring, slightly disgusting thing that everyone still guarding a reputation is too proud to touch. Everyone you came up with chased the version of success that sounds good out loud. You built the one that sounds bad, and 10 years later, the math quietly settled the difference, and no one even saw it happen. You have a notebook somewhere too. Maybe a real one. Maybe just a thing you wanted before you got reasonable. The deadline on it has almost certainly passed. It doesn't matter. You open it again at 40, own my own company by 30. You missed it. But downstairs, your father is alive and you're here for it. The business is running without you. The card by the back door still has your name on it. Maybe the dream was never a deadline. Maybe it was just the thing that kept you from going numb.